Hello, this is Ben Zumeta. I'm here at Old Growth Orchard and Nursery, and also have a permaculture design consulting company called Old Growth Edible Landscapes. And we're here at my home and my wife Kristen's, where we have the Terrea Zumeta Memorial Food Forest that we started planting in 2020 upon my mom, who was my garden mentor, and upon her passing. So it's a walkthrough I like to do every couple times a year, spring and fall usually, just for both seeing the progress or lack thereof over the years and seasons, and to share with family that lives across the country, and to share with anybody else who'd like to learn along with our progress. So this has been a fairly challenging year. We had about a 95,000 acre fire over in the direction that I'm pointing right now. Basically, a horseshoe of fire within about 4.5 miles of our house from here to the east and north and south. Is the Smith River Fire Complex. It started in mid-August, and it caused us to be on a mandatory evacuation that when we left, which we did because of the smoke primarily, and for the sake of our animals, if not ourselves. We were kept out for up to a week at a time, and I think there was about 2 weeks there where we were essentially evacuated to some lovely friend's house along the Smith River. So it could have been worse for us, but it was difficult for the garden and the nursery and orchard, really the orchard primarily, the zone 3 to 4 in the permaculture terms, which really I had to kind of triage our water and my time in supporting our garden in here, our garden and our more established trees. And really, a lot of it came down to just what was the easiest thing to do, which is really what that whole zone division is about, which is, your zone 1 is going to be the easiest place to get materials and like soil and water and yourself and harvesting equipment too. Zone 2 is going to be a little bit more difficult, and so you go there less frequently, and zone 3 even more so. And zone 4 would be quite infrequent and largely self-sustaining after a minimal establishment period. So a lot of what we're going to be walking through is kind of just what thrived and more as well as survived that kind of challenging period in the peak of the dry season, in addition to having a really anomalously long dry season this year. Starting, I believe our last rain was May 5th. Today is October 13th. It's been a little bit warmer this past couple weeks, and we've seen a lot more bee activity come back, and really stretched the season. Had some nights in the in the mid 30s, but tomatoes even kept going until really we started having a waning light and just generally pretty low temperatures. But I think we had a longer season because of the heat in the soil from these hugelkultur beds. Some of the tomatoes didn't do so well. Some of them were actually salvaged from a friend's nursery who just sometimes I like a little challenge. We love these what are they? Silverleaf sunflowers. They seem to be great for birds and attracting pollinators. These tree collards provide an abundant amount of greens. Fennel can have up to I think 56 different species of wasp, and I believe that also includes bees that pollinate it. And a lot of birds also seem to really appreciate the seeds as this time of year. And it's a biomass accumulator and obviously thrives. So it's just one of those chop and drop plants, along with actually the tree collards have become that as well. I really had to actually cut them back in places where I want to have things with more fungal dominated soil. requirements. Like this cherry tree right here, which is thriving, planted in late 2020. Those bags are coffee grounds, ready to go into this building Johnson Sioux bioreactor compost. Really, it's just a passively aerated compost system where I'll add more pipes. So that basically the idea is nowhere in the compost is more than a foot away from air. And these are our pups. I'm happy to share it. Isis is still chugging along and has done a 4-mile hike with us, and as recently as a couple weeks ago. Sometimes we take the other dogs for harder hikes and let her have a break from this puppy Sunny's rambunctiousness. This tree here, I actually lost maybe a half dozen prunus trees that I bought from some of the more expensive trees we bought, and they died over this winter. A friend suspects it was cold injury, which is our coldest days were when we had deep snow. So, and there was no sign of vole damage. So I guess I'd take her advice on it. But it grew. Rootstock is growing back quite well. That's a myrobalan rootstock that I will be able to graft onto. That cherry right there is a Rainier. It's doing quite well. Our nectarine has come back. This tree was pretty badly affected by peach leaf curl just last summer, and some compost teas and extracts seem to have helped remedy that. This is going to end up being just a blackberry bed. I'm going to move this blueberry over to the bed behind that truck, which has a couple blueberries that didn't make it through the hot, dry spell when I was struggling to water everything and keep our off-grid water tanks as full as possible, ready for a fire that at one point firefighters had hoses all over this entire property and surrounding the house. They did say we were the second best prepared on the entire mountain in this low divide community, just behind the local fire chief in terms of preparedness, and that they were glad to say they thought they would be able to save it regardless of how bad things got, but couldn't say the same for neighbors, which was pretty scary. And hopefully we can do some community action projects like biochar, burns, and fuel reductions that'll build soil, hold water, and reduce wildfire risk. Here's another one of those. That's a cherry that is a Montmorency sour cherry. The rootstock is growing back, so I'll graft with something onto it. This is going to end up being raspberry beds. Three different types of raspberries in here, and I'm going to move all these Vaxinum blueberries and wild huckleberries over to the blueberry bed. Still getting some delicious, I believe these are Carolina everbearing raspberries. A couple of Johnson Sioux compost bins, and the near one tower is started in March, and the far one was started in November and is ready to spread. This is one that is made up mostly was based around mushroom growing materials that I've composted along with some weeds. Hopefully, some of them will possibly survive the composting process. Some ornamental roses over here I planted in an area that had some contamination from the prior occupant, doing burns over here of stuff that I wouldn't burn myself, but I guess, the landfill isn't really a way, so at some point, you can only throw stones, Anyway, so this is more of an ornamental area. There are a couple of hazelnuts in here, largely for wildlife, potentially in the future, and actually the fruit off of perennials won't transfer any trace metals that might have been left behind from the burning of some stuff that, I'd rather not be there, but is. this is the blueberry hugelkultur. Some of them are thriving. They started from little plugs. They're starting to pick up. Got a few blueberries this year off of it, with strawberries mixed in. Some wild strawberries, alpine strawberries that are really delicious. And this catches some of the runoff from the road above where the contaminated area is. And actually, that's my compost depot that has now been emptied. But so this catches some of that nutrient runoff. Sunny over there is walking on the asparagus bed. Hey, Sunny. Hey, Sunny. Come. He is a cute little guy that is hard to discipline because he is so cute and endearing, and he doesn't do anything that bad. Some raspberries along the back there that I've picked up with a little bit more compost that I've added. It's a nursery bed. It's got about between 125 and 150 chestnuts, hazelnuts, and some walnuts in there. Looks like a couple weeds I need to take out. Interesting. I think that's stinging nettle in there. Actually, I'll probably try to transplant that. I don't have any other sources of it on the property. But yeah, those are part of what I have available to sell, or just the beginnings of a sellable product. I'll be building a lot more of those. Those are marionberries. So in addition to eventually growing fruit, a lot of this is intended to produce seed stock for future breeding projects based around the trees like these, which grown from seed thrive on really poor soil. That is the main only real lacking thing I'd say in our property is soil. But in learning permaculture design and practices, soil is as well as keyline scaled permanence. Soil is the least permanent and the quickest thing to build. As climate, which I'd say is pretty ideal for me and for fruit trees here, is the most difficult thing to change. Well, unless you burn about 60 million years worth of life per year, which we're doing with fossil fuels apparently. So this is a mix of raspberries. There's a Pinot Noir grape mixed in there. One of the few survivors from the first year's planting before I had irrigation on that line. So I'll be taking more cuttings off of that and mixing it in as we work our way down. It really is clear that trees like soil. I had about 85% survival year over year, but many of the trees that were planted at the same time as this one, which I'd say is 10 plus feet tall, even after some fairly heavy pruning, following some grafting failures, it is planted at the same time as I'll show you some of the trees that were planted at the same time. Some of the smallest trees out here were planted the same week as that. Which is, of course, it's surrounded by a terrace. It's below a terrace full of good compost and soil, and it's in a second terrace of its own. And as I have seen how well this soil drains, I, in hindsight, am going to be cutting off those drainages or slowing them down. We do get up to 10-inch rain events in a day here, so I didn't want to mess around with flooding, which has been a big problem in the lower areas of this region that I've lived in. I've lived down in the Crescent City, Fort Dick area for about 6 years before we moved here in early 2020. But man, the drainage is different on the top of a mountain versus down at the bottom of a valley, which of course I knew, but it all multiplies and adds up. So that's one of that Coe's Golden Drop seems to really like this area. That's a delicious, sweet golden plum. Some elderberries that I planted, and currants planted right here. This fig is starting to take off. I finally gave a lot of these trees a bit more compost to help them along, which as you go down the hill, it becomes a lot more difficult to move compost and soil amendments. Don't know what caused that. I'll have to come back with pruners. But that was a French plum, so a pear. So that was planted at the same time as that 12-foot tall, 10 to 12-foot tall plum back there. Black locust and cherry. This is another one of the rootstock that is coming back after, I believe it was a apricot died back. Another tree that got hit pretty hard by peach leaf curl that has done quite a bit better this season, but they're clearly just surviving and could use all the help they can get. So one of the things I've worked on over time, just a little bit here and there, as I have an hour or two before dark or in between rain or heavy rains or whatnot, I have been taking stones and rocks, really it's not stone, it's really easily fractured rock, off of this what will eventually be a little bit flatter pathway terrace, and putting them into a contour to it will only stop a surface full of water, but just by stopping it and making it take a few turns around a couple layers of rock, that will cause the sediments to drop out, because as water slows, it drops its sediment. The faster water moves, the exponentially more sediment it can carry. So if you slow it down and bifurcate it or split it up, you will naturally create a little sieve that will catch and build soil behind it, as I have seen thousands of times over doing trail work. And so here's a golden currant, and I'm going to try to make this a little bit briefer video today, so I'm just going to give a quick little overview. We have a mix of cherry, plum, mulberry, black locust, figs. Blackberries are actually doing quite well in their first year down at the bottom of that hill along the fence line, and they're doing a lot better than the grapes I planted. The grapes did not get irrigated, and these have. So I finally got drip line basically in every growing area of this zone. I'd say inside the fence is a zone 2, but really as I've worked on it, I've come to decide that I need to treat it more relative to its proximity to the road and other access points in how I break down my zones. So just because it's closer to the house than, say, maybe a tree right next to the drive down below the fence line, it doesn't mean it's going to be any easier to assist in growing, water, or harvest. So it really makes sense to have these corridors of more intensively managed areas. And really leaning into these trees, which they get watered maybe once a month, and they've gotten a little bit of wood chips. Maybe I've dropped some compost here and there for them, but they are growing with almost no help from seed and on essentially gravel, of serpentine gravel. So what grows out of them will likely be pretty good, produce fruit that with seeds that will have well-suited offspring. These pine berries, I believe I'm giving too much nitrogen. They look healthy, but they hide the berries quite well too. So we've given over these to succulents, but actually some peas are thriving in this season, this shoulder season between, well, they call it fall, don't they? Between summer and winter, which in this part of California is certainly longer and more pronounced than Southern California, but more and more it does remind me of that John Muir saying, where yes, California has 2 seasons, spring and summer, although the 6 feet of snow last winter is a indication maybe we're far enough north, and we certainly are. We get plenty of chill hours. But we basically had almost no spring this year. Starting May 5th, it started getting quite warm and had no rain, which normally we would get about 15 inches of rain between May 5th and about the 4th of July when it really stops raining. And instead we got about 2/3 of an inch. That's just a little, it's that felt pot down there. It's full of biochar that is getting inoculated with the pond nutrients and helping do a little bit of filtration. Oh, this is nice to see. The cover crops I spread. So as I spread compost, I spread a layer of compost and then a layer of cover crop seed of a few different varietals, varieties or species, from daikon radish and phacelia, or fiddleneck flower, to a lot of bell beans and peas, and then a mix of Pacific Northwest native wildflowers and clovers. It is fun to see his enthusiasm. This pond got almost completely dry this summer, before it rained in mid-September. We even used a little bit of overflow from our water tanks to recharge it, or to keep fish alive, and with a few hundred extra gallons of water. So this whole hillside here, I'm not going to go very far over here because this is one of the areas the trees were clearly not really enjoying the soil as much up this hillside, and it is significantly harder to get water there. So I gave one good try to give everything watering while the fire evacuation was happening, but really it went from having maybe 60% of the survival of those trees to, I believe, probably there's 5 surviving trees up there. But if they end up becoming full-size trees, which they is what they're growing on, the rootstock, that's plenty. And really, I did not expect to have such a high survival rate. I think of all the things in this project that have been confounding is that there's been a high survival rate and not a really great thrival rate, or things have kind of struggled along without dying more than I would have expected. And part of that is because I haven't allowed them to die as much as maybe I should, and follow those zone and time allocations better. But the crab apples here are doing pretty well. A lot of things did lose their leaves in this last hard rain we got. I was trying to hit the sweet spot for fall color and the beautiful autumn light that we get, that cascara. But finding a window when I had time to do a video and the light was right and the weather was right, that's not always easy. This gooseberry is coming back. It did defoliate when it was really dehydrated, and Marion berries are starting to get established in here. Strawberry guavas plugging along with some currants. This I got hit by hail, and also got some herbivore came along and ate it, but it's coming back. It's like Craig's crimson cherry. Mulberry and pomegranate down there. Actually thought the pomegranate was dead when it came back after I planted that mulberry. It's an example of a plum. I believe it's the same variety of rootstock as that 12-foot tall one that is below the garden. And it was planted within a week or two of that. And just the differences in soil. to the fire crews, which I'm very thankful for all their work. Did a lot of thinning back here. Did make access easier. Wouldn't have been my aesthetic and naturalist incline. I just have a hard time cutting things back sometimes, but I think they probably made the right decisions. That's our future. That will be an accommodation for woofers to use a bathhouse in conjunction with that tiny home down there, the mobile tiny home, the cedar-sided structure. And I love these azaleas for their fall color. In the spring they smell amazing as well. So another kind of telling thing that's nice to do walkthroughs and frequently is that I can see little differences in soil temperature, exposure this time of year, because I spread compost and cover crop within about a week and a half, and I know which one I did first, and just seeing what sprouts faster, it's an indication that's the spot where the soil gets a lot more warmth this time of year, and vice versa. So a lot of these tree cages I'll be able to repurpose for other things, or planting other things. And really, I did really when planting, I stretched my watering capacity and time, probably to its maximum, and in doing so, I really realistically did know this, but it was hard to accept at times, and when I couldn't get back here and had to let some of the trees die, or struggle along and show that they're tough enough to make it through those times of volatility and unplanned circumstances. So this plum it is still alive. So seeing this swale here, it's a great encouraging sign for a future pond that will be really useful for further fire mitigation and preparedness. Had a few survivors from this patch here, largely relating to where water was being stored. There's a cherry there that is still alive, but cherry seems like prunus has just started to lose their leaves in colder areas. This olive is coming back, and we're getting close to the road, so I'm gonna call my pups back in and wish you all well. There is a good amount of trees still surviving up on the upper hillside, but probably down to about 20-25% of what was planted, which will be fine. I mean, that is out of many hundreds, so and realistically, a good percentage won't ever make it to production, but it will. What does will have proven that it can survive the management or mismanagement that I've provided. So really, the things that I believe I did right that will make all these challenges really just things that this food forest and homesteading project and business more resilient is that I did plan for this. I in a way. Well, I did overplant in terms of numbers of trees that I could actually water. I sought out was able to use take advantage, I guess is the best way to put it, of the great work by Burnt Ridge Nursery, producing large amounts of rootstock for that's very affordable, and really with a really admirable goal of getting more trees planted out into the world. And so, because I was able to get a lot of trees for between $2 and $5, that's a lot less of a hit, and in some ways allows you to do more novel, low maintenance management techniques. So, and really, I never had a plan for what I would do with 650 fruit trees and 300 nut trees. I'm pretty confident if we end up with 60 nut trees and maybe 100 fruit trees, that's going to be plenty to work with. So that is part of the whole strategy, and I think there's 1,000 different ways that one could have done it. I could have done it 10 trees at a time, made sure all 10 of those thrived, and maybe in 5 years I'd be at a point where I was getting more fruit and productivity. But over the long term, and with my goal of trying to produce old growth edible landscapes, which with trees that can withstand the changing climate and just the inherent difficulties of growing on a rock spinning through space, with a whole bunch of 8 billion apes running around, that it's that I guess death and loss are all part of evolution and growth, and we're learning to work with it is maybe is one of the takeaways from this year, and very thankful for the mentors I've had in trying to understand that, and being prepared, as well as the good fortune I've had from my family and whatnot of starting from a point of strength and being nurtured and supported by my mom, my dad, my entire extended family. Has been very supportive of this project and so much of what led into it, and what helped me learn to be able to start such a project, and hopefully pass along what I've learned to others who, if you are interested in seeing the potential of your land or your farm, and seeing it through new eyes, and through as somebody who has undertaken a variety of different challenges in helping to make land more biodiverse and abundant, I'd be happy to help. And so that's what Old Growth Edible Landscapes is all about. And I'm going to say farewell and hope you have a wonderful holiday season from here at Old Growth Orchard and Nursery. Be well.